the outskirts of this consultation which is going on regarding the peri-urban areas in India and Pakistan. We have today with us scholars from East-West Center from Hawaii and Saki Water and other institutions from India and SDPI from Pakistan. And we'll be straight away asking them questions to set a basic premise for you. And we have students lined up from the universities from the same discipline, and they'll be participating with us. Now I introduce my guest to you. To the extreme left is Mr. Sameed Saxena, then Dr. Waqar. To his right is Dr. Abid Sulairi from SDPI, then Jasween Jarat from Saki Water, Hyderabad, and Mr. Vishal Narayan. I'll just start discussion by asking this question to Mr. Sameed. Very briefly, would you like to define what is the basic premise?
Basically, these places have inherited the worst of two kinds of regions, the rural region and the urban region. And this chaotic situation in these places has two dimensions. It is chaotic from a biophysical perspective where agricultural land use and industrial land use coexist, but it is also quite chaotic from an institutional and governance perspective where people don't know how to manage these kind of areas. Thank you.
Interesting. Jasmine, would you like to explain some of the delicacies and intricacies, how this peri-urban areas is destroying one of the most beautiful city in the subcontinent, which is Hyderabad?
Basic issue is that this is unregulated, uncontrolled, and unplanned process of urbanization that is driven more by the real estate interests rather than by the interests of the entire community. And essentially what is happening is a struggle over resources, especially natural resources such as land and water. And the net outcome is that the affluent and the influential and the powerful, their interest, the interest of that minority prevails over the interest of the majority, which are the excluded and the deprived. I think it's a dynamic of this struggle that's going on.
Dr. Abid, situation is a bit different in Pakistan. How would you match up? How would you couple it up?
Perhaps we look at it differently. I don't see that it's that much different. Of course, our natural lakes are also getting contaminated, polluted, or getting encroached very fastly. Example, Kalar Kohar Lake. The dilemma starts when those peri-urban settlements, they are neither owned by your city government nor they are owned by your rural administration. And in the past we had some sort of tier called Tehsil Municipal Authority. But after this devolution of power system, it got wrapped up. Now neither we have this Tehsil Municipal Authority nor we have any other level. So of course the district administrations are there, our town administrators are there. But peri-urban areas, they are still, when we talk of their governance issues and when we talk of their civic amenities issues, they keep on posing challenge to the rulers. And this is what we want to actually discuss, and we want to learn lesson from India and Pakistan, what worked and what didn't work. Because in both of these countries, this urbanization is taking place rapidly. It is uncontrolled, it is asymmetrical.
Dr. Vishnu, basically you are a university professor. What are the academics?
Different people see different aspects of peri-urban. And I think even with the best of our efforts, we will never be able to come to a consensus definition of what is peri-urban, but one can just get as close to it as possible in terms of defining certain characteristics. So, and they're all students and they come from different parts of the country. I think visually it's very easy to identify what is peri-urban when you just drive along a highway. So when you drive along a highway, you see this mixed patchwork of different types of land uses. You see agricultural fields, you see brick kilns, you see village ponds, you see amusement parks, recreation centers. So I think visually that is what is meant by peri-urban. So it's much easier to identify peri-urban through the visual landscape, than to come down to a concrete set of indicators or characteristics. So I think that is the complex academics of peri-urban.
Dr. Waqar, how do you see this issue?
Coming to your question, Tahir, as you said, what challenge this poses for the planners? It's basically a trade-off question. While these areas, peri-urban areas, are good for the livelihoods of the people, that they are providing them a stepping stone, you need to have a governance framework to actually regulate these areas in a manner that that these people can actually have a sustainable environment in which they carry on their day-to-day activities, and their activities do not harm others.
Here we'll take a very short break and we'll come back then again, and after the break we'll give a chance to our students to ask a question. So we'll go on a break, so don't go away.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
To advance the discussion a bit further, we'll go to our students.
Mohammad Taimur Shakil. I'm PhD scholar at Arid Agriculture University. I want to talk to Dr. Waqar Ahmed. When the cities are expanding, the urban areas are growing, they are going to occupy the peri-urban areas. These peri-urban areas, what I think, will be converted into urban areas eventually. And what will be the status of these peri-urban areas after 2 or 3 years?
Part of my answer will come from the definition issue, actually. There's a definition issue as regards what is urban and rural in case of Pakistan as well. So in the first 3 censuses, for example, it was a population measure that was used, that if a certain amount of population is above a threshold level, this area would be counted as urban. Later on in 1981-98 censuses, we said that any region having a municipal authority office is called urban. So as you rightly pointed out, the distinction between urban and rural is not that hard and fast.
How much the business greed is responsible?
Yes, there is a direct competitive kind of a role that the commercial and the industrial sector is playing with the concerns of livelihood of the larger communities. And the argument is that these ventures will provide employment, and therefore in a sense they are supportive, but in practice that is not happening. The people who are displaced from these, as a result of this, these ventures, often are is a much larger percentage of the ones that are absorbed, if they are absorbed at all. There may be absorption of very skilled labor, and the people who are displaced may not have the necessary skills. So there is a direct competition between that. And yes, it is very, very unfortunate when agriculturally fertile lands are displaced by industrial or commercial ventures. One of the most unfortunate examples is the water bottling plants. I mean, water, you must remember, is never manufactured. Water is only processed and treated. Water is available in nature. So if water is available, why can we not treat the water to a satisfactory degree of potable quality by the public sector utilities? We have public sector utilities in all the cities. Why can you not get good potable quality water in your water pipe? Why should you have at every conference, we are dependent on this bottled water? Whereas this bottled water also comes from your country. It is treated and processed in your country, and you have to pay much more for that. I think it was mentioned in the morning, I think by you yourself, that the total cost of production must not be more than about 2 rupees maximum.
What is your side of the coin?
People, they were well off in their native homelands, in their native hometowns. We never had to leave our rural areas and come to major urban hubs, and then even mega cities, and then to other parts of the world. So obviously these are either one has to go for a better quote-unquote living standard for the sake of education, for the sake of livelihoods, for the sake of food security, for the sake of social justice, for the sake of social harmony. So there can be more than one factors. And unless and until, and industrialization is perhaps only one factor in it.
Okay, from the problem to the explanation to the situation, and now we are moving towards the solution part. And here we take a short break, and after the break we'll ask further question to the students. In the meanwhile, they can firm up their questions if there are any, or they can form up their short comment if they want to, and I'll ask Samit a question which is part of the solution as well. So we take a short break. Stay with us.
It's diverse.
It's original.
It's SDTV.
Welcome again. We'll ask students to have their opinion and ask a question.
My question is for Ms. Jasween. If peri-urban areas recognized as a new city and develop separate local government system, what you say is that solution for many problems related with peri-urban areas?
They are the offshoots of the unplanned urbanization. If it develops into another independent urban center, but with the same logic as the main city has developed, then it will generate its own peri-urban, its own periphery. And periphery, not merely geographical, but periphery in terms of the quality of living. I mean, it's very peripheral to the quality of living. So I think it's not the question of having more cities which are on the same lines as the old cities. The question is of questioning the urbanization of any city. Questioning how is the main city being developed. Why should peripheries be generated as substandard or subclass living conditions or highly asymmetric? That's the issue.
Vishal, very shortly, do you think we should prepare as students and the young generation, this population bulge, which we called it as dividend, we should use them to better understand so they can have more civic sense and everything?
The way to involve students in this is to train them to question this fragmentation and this dichotomy. Okay, I mean, these days, very early in school, we are taught the framework for planning. We are taught the framework for rural development, and then when you go to BA, graduation, masters, we go on elaborating upon that. So I think the way to mobilize students is to sensitize them to the perils, to the dangers of this dichotomy between urban planning and rural development. And the peri-urban problems are a result of this dichotomy because we don't see the relationship of one with the other. So I think that is the way, that is the idea.
Let's ask the students.
As we talked earlier, that why people actually migrate to urban areas is because of the opportunities. Everyone wants to live a better life, and rural areas are less developed and they have less opportunities. Plus, we have also an issue of mechanization and industrialization. Advanced technology has no doubt make our lives much more easier. But on the other hand, if we see that it has made a lot of people jobless as well.
Urban area contribute to 78% of the GDP. Is this contribution is on the sustainable basis, or because we are degrading our environment day by day by harming our land resources, water resources? So what is the effect of peri-urban area on the GDP, and is it on sustainable basis?
Okay, Waqar, would you like to respond to some of the things?
The over 70% contribution to its GDP, it's the overall urban contribution. It's not about peri-urban. Further research is required in order to estimate the precise contribution of peri-urban areas to GDP.
Thank you very much. Anyone who want to relate to this discussion in some way is more than welcome. Before I ask for closing comments,
people living in peri-urban areas, are they the trouble causers, or are they the victims?
There is also, the peri-urban areas are also used as dumping grounds of all kinds of waste. And I'm not talking only of wastewater. I'm talking of the solid waste. I'm talking of the various other kinds of, wastes. So the people who do not have access to, the resource-poor people are the victims. And the ones who are aggravating that situation in the peri-urban locality, however we define it, would be part of the problem who's causing that. They are not the entire set of problems, but they would be aggravating it because they are least concerned what happens beyond the boundary where they live. There is an indifference. They live in islands. And that's the pattern of a lot of our peri-urban development. Like Vishal mentioned, farmhouses, there are complexes, etc. Because land values have risen. So they buy cheap land and then develop it for that gated city. So there's no yes or no. I mean, there's no one answer to that. Both but depends whether they're resource poor or resource rich.
I think there should be some kind of policies regarding irrigation charges. Irrigation charges should be equitably set, and so that farmers could get full reward of their poor farmers.
Dr. Abid, how would you sum up? What do you think? What is your take?
All of us, we are both. Not only the people who are living in peri-urban areas, but also people who are living in urban areas or people who are living in rural areas. So in some sense, we are oppressors. In some sense, we are victims. And we can always justify our oppression with relating it to our sufferings. And we can say, now because we don't have enough, for example, this piped water that comes to our houses, so we have to install some sort of a pumping machine so that I can steal the water that would go to my neighbor's place, because otherwise my family water requirement, those would not be met. So with these sort of excuses, we will, and if when in the society everyone is doing it, so of course then there would be a mix of society where everyone is sufferer and everyone is oppressor. How to mitigate some of the negative effects? Perhaps there are 3 levels of doing it. The first is that providing the minimum basic facilities and whatever the threshold we define, and of course that would change from place to place or from country to country, but agreeing on some sort of basic threshold that should be available across all country in all the rural areas, irrespective if they are in Balochistan or if they are in Punjab or if they are in Sindh, Pakhtunkhwa, Kashmir, because there's huge disparities, even interprovincial and intraprovincial disparities that do occur. So if we agree on some sort of a fundamental threshold, that should be there. So perhaps we can reduce this trend and the need to come to these cities. Third thing perhaps that we can do is strengthen our local governments. This tier of local government is extremely important, because that tier would empower them and that tier would take care of many of the problems that the people they are facing in peri-urban areas, and that tier would also try to mitigate some of the negative impacts that those peri-urbanized settlements are creating or causing on the settled urban areas. So these are some of my suggestions for it.
Well, thank you very much. With this, we come to the end of the program. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this program. And I thank especially the students who came here and participated in a very lively discussion.